right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another YouTube Live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us. Today, we are pleased to have Sven and Jason from Sphere joining us, and we are going to have a good, nice discussion regarding their journey and a brief history about how they got started and etc. So, welcome to the show, Sven and Jason.
Thanks for having us.
Hey Vahe, good to see
Awesome.
you again.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we want to keep this one a little more friendly. So basically, what I guess the audience here, this is a game dev channel, even though we are in the enterprise space, but at one point, pretty much the technology that we are utilizing is game technology. So I wanted to kind of, so that's kind of like a brief introduction about the channel and what the actual channel is about. But more importantly, I wanted to kind of hear your stories, and I wanted to see how you guys first do a quick, brief introduction of each one of you, your current roles and responsibilities, and then after that we can get into like the background story. So maybe we can start with you, Simon.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so I'm Sven. I'm the CEO and founder of Sphere. Um, my background is I'm originally from Switzerland, so hence the accent. I moved here to the San Francisco Bay Area about 6 years ago, I believe now. And my background is in computer science and business. Before I started the company, which we're going to talk about, my last job was at Disney Research, and then after that, I've been doing this now for over 6 or 7 years. It's been quite a journey, so there's definitely a lot to talk about. But yeah, that's a few words on myself.
Awesome, great, thanks. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, hey Vahe, and hello everyone. So my name is Jason Lee. By title, I'm the global head of sales for Sphere. I joined Sphere in October of 2023. So, just a little bit over a year now, well, actually quite a bit over a year. It's my first foray into the XR space, so I can't wait to tell everyone about how I got here. But that being said, software sales is the only job I've really ever had. So, I'm going to date myself here. When I graduated college in 1999, we had seen kind of Y2K come. The world didn't
Yeah.
blow up or end like everyone had expected. And there was a kind of a second .com bubbling up. And so I got into tech at that point, and I never looked back. And it's been a fun 20+ year ride.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that. By the way, we also were supposed to have Colin, another one of your colleagues, join us, but unfortunately, due to his geographical locations, he wasn't able to join us this time. So maybe some other time he can also join us and give us his background. Okay, cool. So I guess one question: how did this all start, Sven? Like, what was the primary? What was that key moment that you decided, you know what, this is what I want to do now? This is,
Yeah.
I've been in the industry and now I feel like, okay, this is the time that I want to kind of start this massive initiative.
Yeah, so it's like maybe a little background. So I've always been like super fascinated with science fiction and like new technology. That's been since I was a little boy. That's always fascinated me. Like the classical stuff, Star Wars, and in general like sci-fi. And then I'm from a family of like my parents have had their own business, my grandparents had their own business, like small businesses, but so it was always like I always witnessed like the being an entrepreneur. That for me it was always kind of clear that that's what I wanted to do at one point eventually. And then once I was about to graduate college, when a bit later than Jason.
Yeah, that was
um,
actually going to be my next question, but we'll wait for that one. I
Yeah.
like
no, it was
yeah,
around 2016 when Microsoft 2015, 2016 when Microsoft presented the HoloLens 1, and I think the audience
yeah, yeah.
here knows still remembers that, right? That was really like what the whole, I would say, say about the HoloLens program what we will, but it definitely helped kickstart, I would say, our industry to a large degree. And I still remember, so I was still living back with my parents at the time, and I remember like Microsoft teased like, oh, we're gonna announce something big. And I remember I was in like my parents' living room and had the live stream on back in Switzerland was that, and then they presented the HoloLens. I remember Alex Kipman came on stage with the
Yeah.
HoloLens, and back then the demo was like maybe a few if you remember was like I think he was in a staged living room and would watch like a football game or the weather or something like that. But for me, it was extremely fascinating. That moment was like, wow, this
Yeah.
technology is like this. It felt to me like this is like the sci-fi actually starting to come true.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it, but I just knew this is technology I want to work with. So it was more like, and a lot of like founders have this like, oh, I've been working in the industry for 10 years. I see these problems, and then I wanted to solve them, and that's not what happened with me. For me, it was more like the other way around, almost. Like it was like the technology fascinated me enormously, um, and then from that, I start thinking about, okay, how could you apply the technology to real world problems? And
Yeah.
I'm definitely not like a consumer tech guy. I don't own any social media. Or I don't use any social media. Never been my thing. But enterprise always fascinated me way more in the sense that you can solve. I am a gamer, so everyone who's love
Yeah.
games, don't get me wrong. My high school was more like playing World of Warcraft than actually going to school, but that's another story. But like from a business perspective, I always wanted to go into enterprise because like it's a bit more tangible to me. Like, okay, you can actually solve a problem right objectively. And what I did then back also with my co-founder in back in Switzerland, we started like actually interviewing companies. I think at over like a few months was maybe 50 or 60 companies that we interviewed just to understand what are the pain points, the problems, where and a broad variety, media, manufacturing, like we didn't really know where this could be best applied. And then it was pretty obvious that like the best or the most need would really be in this more, let's call it industrial space,
Yeah.
where you have like, automotive, aerospace, manufacturing. I think that where we still are at, like, 5, 6 years later, that took definitely a little bit of time to really take off the whole industry, but so that's kind of how it all started, and then one led to the next, and then at one point I was like, okay, this is now Sphere. This is like the product we want to build, and what is kind of cool, not to like pat myself on the back or anything, but was that we envisioned this thing in yeah, like 2016. It took a while to actually build it and go to market, but once we hit market, it was actually something that customers wanted, and that was a gamble, right? You think you know what people want, but then there's so much time in between. The world changes, and once we went into market, or went to market, it was really something that people wanted, and yeah, now we've been doing that ever since.
No, that's great. That's fascinating. As you say, like science fiction is now a science fact, right? And then in the
Yeah.
future, God knows what's going to happen. Like in the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to be great. All right. So same question to you, Jason. Like, how did you get into the space? Like, what was the main trigger that motivated you to get into space? And then obviously, then we'll talk about like how you two met together eventually. What was the connection? What how you guys met? So
Yeah,
so first, how you got into the space and etc. And then afterwards, what was the key moment that you guys had that networking
sure.
done basically?
Sure. So from my perspective, not only is this my first foray into XR, but it's my first foray into a startup as well. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. So, like I said, software sales has been like the only job I've had, real job I've had since graduating college. And I've done kind of multiple things within that software or sales, profession, right? I've done inside sales. I've been a field executive. I've been a partner director, so I've managed the partner ecosystem. I've led sales teams. I was at a company where we had a very niche solution. It was a maintenance and engineering solution, strictly for the commercial aviation MROs and like the OEMs within the aviation world. So it was a very, very niche solution. And part of that was obviously the front end maintenance piece and it connected to the back end supply chain. So it was a comprehensive solution. But through that job, I got to see or get a better understanding of, you know, all the collaboration and the logistical issues that come around maintaining and supporting complex machinery like an aircraft. And that company that I was at, we had actually partnered with a very small company that had a remote assistance solution. And I thought, you know, at the time I was like, wow, this is great. You know, it's like on a mobile device and they can see what I can see. And then I was introduced to Sphere, and I was just like, okay, wait, this is the next level, right? I mean,
Next
that
level, next level.
it made it look so rudimentary what the other organization was doing. So for me, it was the not only did I have a good understanding of the use case and understanding the value, the business value of the use case, but when I saw the technology, it was a no-brainer. So for me to jump into XR based on the solution and not so necessarily so much about the industry. It wasn't like I was like dying to get into XR, but I knew the problem that Sphere was trying to provide a solution for, and I kind of saw what was available out there in terms of the types of solutions. And Sphere was not only addressing a major issue that I knew clients had, but was doing it in a much more innovative and efficient way. So to join I wouldn't say I necessarily joined XR, but I joined Sphere, and that was kind of the main driver, was just seeing what could happen there. And on the side, it was really more so because I had this broad experience within software sales, touching a number of different areas. It actually allowed me to bring all those different experiences into Sphere as a small company. You know, you got to wear many hats, and it was nice and rewarding for me to be able to join an organization where I could provide some value right away. So it was, at least I hope I was providing value right away, Sven. You can be the ultimate judge of that. But
he has
it
and
felt
has
nice.
continued to do so. Yes.
It felt nice.
Great, great. Thank you both. So it's really interesting. And Saman, you mentioned something that I think you said that luckily, but then you mentioned that you guys actually did some studying when you met with the your other co-founder. So it wasn't solely on luck, right? You guys actually did some survey as far as the industry, as far as the market. So it was kind of like a calculated, right, semi-calculated, kind of like a risk taking, and it paid off, I would say. But having said that, that's pretty much what I'm taking away from it. What were the early challenges, right? Like as a startup, obviously you're going to have many different challenges, but what were some of the main ones that you had to kind of overcome, and how did you overcome them, basically?
So it's when I get this question, I have to like smile a bit because it always seems like it's in the past, and like being in the startup world, it's constant, right? It never ends.
In
Which is part of the journey, right? You have to at one point start to almost enjoy it, otherwise you're not going to make it. If you like if you think like, because that was also my mindset. The initial 6 months are hard, and then it's not coasting, but then it's like easy, a little easier. That's not the case, right? You just grow the company. It's a little bit with children, right? What is the saying? Like
new problems
if you have
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, there's just like they get older and then you have more or new problems. The same
Yeah.
with startups, right? It's just that the problems change. But in the early days, I think what was the biggest challenge, I think that's not unique to us even, that, or let's say there's a few problems that, every startup has, then there's a few problems that maybe we specifically had, and then I'd say there's a few problems that everyone in the XR space had. And I think in the XR space was hardware. Which is probably even something when people listen to us like, well, what are you talking about? We still have that issue to some degree today, but it's a lot better now. I assure you,
Much better.
because back in 2016 we had the HoloLens 1, and that was it. And the HoloLens 1 was, I would still say it was a trailblazer, right? It really helped develop the market, but it was by no means a device you could actually use productively. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, we tried to convince ourselves and customer at the time that it is, but it was not, right? It was a dev kit to experience it, and I think it succeeded in that. but it was not good enough to really have a at scale deployments. And I think no one really did. I mean, there were a few news things like, oh, this company bought 1,000, but they always knew that it's not real. They're not actually using it. Anyways, so that was a big challenge for us. Like how do you sell a product if there's not really a platform that you can sell it, because we're software only, right? We're not doing any hardware ourselves. We're at this point now device agnostic. We support a variety of devices. Now today we have like 10 plus, right? But back then it was one, and that was difficult, especially then this transition between then HoloLens 1 got phased out and HoloLens 2 came, but way too late. So there was like a 1 year gap in like 2018, 2019 into 2020, into early 2020, when there was no spatial computing hardware available, because Microsoft had HoloLens 2 got delayed. HoloLens 1 was already not sold anymore. And that was probably the one of the most difficult times for our company. And I know a lot of other companies actually went out of business at the time, because what are you going to do? What are you going to sell? I mean, we were lucky enough to have being funded by investors, VC, so we were able to bridge that time. But that was definitely difficult. And I would say what I personally underestimated the most is people management. When you think of you start a company, you think about the business model, the technology, the go-to-market, all these things, right? Or at least I did. And what I did not think about is like how hard and difficult it's going to be to attract the right people. The people can actually, I mean, Jason mentioned it, right? You need people who come in and provide value, right? As a company, so as a startup, especially, right? In a company with 100,000 employees, if 10% are not performing, nothing happens. In a startup, if 10% are not performing, it's catastrophic, right? Everyone needs to be on top of their game, and the other thing is also then to actually manage them, right? To keep people happy, to keep them engaged, to have all the infights, even if you have a small team, then someone doesn't get along with the other person, and all these things, which I did not really consider. I mean, it's maybe someone's like, yeah, what an idiot. Of course, that's part of the journey. But for me, that was like more of like, we're all professionals. We all get together, work on that. That's going to be fine. But that honestly was probably the biggest challenge for me, and continues to be. Like, and when I talk to other like founders and CEOs, a lot of them say the same thing. It's like that's really the challenge. On the flip side is also what makes, I think, a good startup. Of course, you need to have the right idea, the right all these things, but like the people are so crucial. I'm definitely very lucky and super happy that we've had over the years, and also now a very strong team. Because there's no way you can make it alone, right? There's just forget about that. You need a very strong team that you can rely on, that push the company forward. And I think that was my biggest learning. But again, in the early days, also one of the biggest challenges.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree on that one. I think the team and the people that make up the core of the company are extremely important and essential. And finding the right people to fill the right positions and the roles is a challenge. And then once you find them, of course, everyone is going to have their own like different perspectives, different things, and the interpersonal relationships and all that stuff. So technology is one aspect of things, right? The hardware, software, the SDKs that are available, and all of those things. But those are like solvable, right? Eventually, you can solve those things. The human side of things, I believe it's going to be a little more challenging to do that. So that's something
exactly,
I guess all of us, that's something all of us are learning. I mean, I myself, I still have so much to learn. So 100% agree on that.
And especially if you're, my background is more in engineering. I'm an engineer at heart, and we're used to like looking at problems analytically and try to, exactly as you said, right? A technology that's a problem to solve, right? Okay, we need to be able to get this feature in or solve this like technical problem, and then you apply the analytical skills to do that. That doesn't work with human beings, right? That's humans are so much more complex than any machine ever, but that's it. It was exactly that's exactly as you said.
100%. Very cool. Very cool. So I would say like today, what you have compared to the idea and the vision that you had when you started? What's the is it kind of in line, or over the years, like you guys have started shifting, and depending on how the direction of the industry or even the technology and frameworks have changed, right? Like
Mm.
as you mentioned, like there's so many different devices now that there's available on the market. How do we like support all of these devices? And then not only that, the impact of AI, right? So that's also another big factor on it. So how do you see those things like impacting the industry overall, and specifically like your particular solution, and how that's going to change over the next, let's say, 5 years, right? What are going to be some of the big impacts from those technologies?
Well, maybe I'll take maybe the first question, a more historic one, and then I'll hand it over to Jason for the AI piece, because that's something we talk about very actively at the moment in our
Okay,
company.
Yeah.
Um,
sounds good.
So yeah, I mean, over the years, for sure, right? I mean, I wouldn't say we never had like a hard pivot or anything like that where we change. You know, there's this famous Slack. I think it's a very famous example where it was initially like an in-game chat for games, and then they moved to like a productivity messaging tool. We didn't have anything like that. It was always like the. It was funny. We just looked at. I think we had a leadership meeting last year or so, and I just found some really old slides from like our first pitch deck that we had back in the 2018 or something like that, or 17 even. And of course, like it looked a lot different, and the names were different, but like the what we want to do is pretty much the same. So it's not like hasn't radically changed. Obviously, we has been refined, right? You mentioned it, right? There's no one could envision exactly what devices are coming, right? Now we have this whole like we have also a new category of device, right? Pass through VR was not a thing back in 2016.
Yeah,
And all these things. So there's more form factors and so on and so on. So it definitely got refined, right? You got to have to very be at that, and that's maybe also the one key thing you have to be as a both as a person and as a company in an emerging field is adaptability, right? You got to be able to adapt to new things that are happening. If you're just like, no, we've been doing it the last 2 years like that, and that's just it, you're going to fail immediately, right? There's so, especially in
yeah,
a space like ours, and everyone knows that here in the audience, it moves so fast, right? There's changes all the time. Hardware player comes in, they drop out, they new categories come in. So I would say it's pretty much the say like largely the overarching vision, what we wanted to do is pretty much the same. It's pretty much intact, but obviously the much more refined, right, on a feature level also, because and that's the important thing. We had early customers basically from once we launched already with a few like anchor customers when we launched a solution, and that feedback we got over the years is invaluable.
yeah,
I often when I talk to investors, they're always like, "Well, what's your edge, right? Why are you better than competitors, or what would prevent someone new entering the space?" And that's like, the usual stuff, right? Our customer base, the so many years of development, right? It's not easy to replicate, but what's even harder to replicate is getting this real feedback from customers, right? That you
yeah,
just don't have when you start. And I mean, we made just to give you one concrete example that maybe some people can feel that too, especially in the enterprise, is like with network requirements. You're from a
sure,
especially for example in gaming, right? No one cares. Your home internet is wide open. You can install whatever you want and use all the
yeah, yeah,
ports and protocols you want. And the enterprise is like, okay, we have one port, one protocol. It's like TCP 443, and everything needs to be whitelisted. And it's like a super tricky, especially for like our solution heavily relies on like collaboration, real time,
yeah, yeah,
audio, video streaming, all these things, which are not so common in the enterprise environment. And that we horribly failed the first couple times we deployed at a customer. It was like nothing worked, right? Because of the network requirements. And that's something we had to learn, right? So these things you learn along the way. That's obviously maybe a trivial example, but there's many, many, many more. I'm obviously not gonna tell everything for our competition. No, jokes
yeah,
aside, but that's really something you would. It's not easy to just jump in, and it's not even limited to startups. We've had very large competitors in the space that failed these. Even today, we like last year we won a large customer, a very very large customer that's very well known. Um, and our competition was very large companies in our space, and they didn't pass security tests. for example. So there's still like a thing where you really need to know what you're doing. You really need to know what these companies are looking for. And that's really something we've learned a lot as an organization, which is very powerful to have that knowledge and continues to be powerful, right? Because we get more and more feedback every day on features, on like these other factors, and that's definitely been a big learning for all of us. But yeah, hand it over to Jason with the AI, which we're all super. Maybe I chime in later because it's a topic that really excites
Sounds
me.
good.
Of
Sounds
course,
good.
and you can't have any discussion without those two letters, and or at least you can't have any tech discussion without those two letters involved, right? So, but I mean, let me take a step back though, because I think it actually segues nicely from the previous question. Is when I first joined the company, everything that we did was really based on use cases, and you know, hearing from Sven the fact that they had interviewed all these companies and kind of they were giving them use cases on you know how they could use this technology, then it makes sense on how we approach the marketplace. But what it did is it created confusion, right? So are you a remote assistance solution? Are you a workflow guidance solution? Are you a training solution? Are you a collaboration solution? What are you guys, right? And I think that created a little bit of confusion in the early stages. And then again, what we did is we looked at our happiest customers, right? The customers that were kind of loyal and saying, you know, we're going to use this technology moving forward. And what we saw was a trend in that our happiest customers were using all the capabilities that Sphere had to offer. So, you know, our workflow guidance capabilities, our remote assist capabilities, our spatial collaboration capabilities, they were kind of using them all. And so from that perspective, we said, okay, you know, why are we approaching the market trying to solve these use case problems? Why not try to define the market, right? And then if our value proposition and why, you know, and our competitive differentiation over our clients is the fact that we have all of these capabilities in a single platform, then why are we pigeonholing ourselves by trying to just go after that specific use case? So to that end, you know, we came up with this concept of spatial intelligence, right? And what that means
Mm.
for us, it's really kind of the converging of mixed reality, right, and artificial intelligence into a single platform. And what we want to deliver there are immersive experiences, you know, context-rich visuals, you know, data-driven insights, right? The collaboration that you need in this day and age with remote workforces. All of that is in a single platform now, and then the goal there is to support automation, real-time decision-making, back because we're bringing it back to the business, right? And we want to support those important, you know, KPIs, right? Automation, real-time decision-making, and we want to do that for companies that rely on like digitally connected frontline workers. So we kind of come up with this concept, and for us, the underlying feature there is AI, right? Because you know, there are technologies out there right now, and we want them to grow en masse, right? We want them to proliferate and become ubiquitous. And when headsets become a little bit more ubiquitous, then you know, obviously the technology that supports the headsets will grow as well too. So there's this you know, domino effect that we're hoping for. But ultimately, if you're an organization that relies on frontline workers, whether you're using headsets, whether you're using mobile devices, it's really about getting those, you know, data-driven insights that AI can deliver. And so we're merging now the AI capabilities with the augmented reality, with the immersive experiences that we're driving. And the goal there is to really create massive innovation on how customers are solving those problems today. And ultimately, that's where we focus now is not on use cases. We're looking at solving business problems. When we have discussions today with organizations that are quote unquote interested in augmented reality, we don't like what's the use case, you know, what are the features, functionality you're looking for? We don't have those conversations. What are the business problems that your group was tasked to solve, right? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
You know, who does it involve? And then if, you know, if the business problem has data, it has people, it has processes, right? That all could become a little bit better, then we believe spatial intelligence is a perfect solution framework for that.
Awesome. Awesome. Absolutely. So the combination of AI with XR to solve specific business problems, as you stated, is going to be super powerful. Um, That's awesome. So is this something that you guys already have deployed, or still is in like R&D, or kind of like in proof of concept kind of thing? Because I know last time we spoke, I think it was over a year ago now, Jason. You did kind of demonstrate some of that AI features. I think that were very. You guys just started doing some research in that area, so I'm assuming now it's much more fully developed and much more integrated with an actual, uh, you know, problem that you're trying to solve.
We're getting there. Let's put it like that. It's no, we're definitely further along. We actually have already first customers using it. I would still say we don't have it fully integrated in our productive or like our production software yet. Will happen later this year or this year. And because it's also not trivial. There's a lot to figure out, but there's very exciting things coming. So we're also gonna focus a bit more our messaging and marketing in the next few months on this topic, because as Jason said, we really fundamentally believe, and that's very important. I always have to explain or tell that we're not doing this because it's trendy, right? A lot of people are just, let's face it, a lot of people integrate AI into their product because it's trendy.
Yeah.
It's like everyone wants to be an AI company and so on. And we actually waited quite a bit. Also, initially when ChatGPT came out, we didn't rush to just like randomly add some AI stuff into our solution, because it almost happened organically. It was pretty obvious then at one point, like what customers are really asking for. And as Jason said, it's not so much about adding a feature, but really like, hey, what can solve the problems for our customers 5 or 10 times better or more efficient, right, than before? And AI definitely has a huge role to play. What really excites me there is like the ability, to, because I do think to consume AI, to interact with AI, there's nothing better than a headset, for example. Like the ability really to talk to it, to show it, right? You have context, right? No, if you type in ChatGPT or Gemini or you name it on a computer, you need to do all this prompting, right? Like a very detailed description of what you want, and then 90% of the time it goes wrong anyways. And now we have people, prompt engineers or specialists in that. I'm horrible, by the way. I always get it wrong. But with a headset, you don't need that. Like the context is the real world around you, right? You can, especially in the enterprise, being able to almost like retrieve the data you need on the fly based on the context you see or you're around. This is extremely powerful, and I think this is like a very, very powerful combination that we'll see a lot happening. And I think for the end user, it's not even that, or we also really try to kind of not have them to burden with the complexity of all of that. Not that they have to really think about, okay, how do I phrase things that it works, but really just to basically be, in a very natural way, interact with a computer, with a headset that maybe is powered by AI then in the back and so on, but like to really just get what you want, right? We also call the project internally, we call that Project Jarvis, because that's kind of a little bit the vision, right? I think everyone here knows Iron Man and Jarvis. That's a bit like the vision where we want to take this, right? Really have for the industrial enterprise or frontline workers, as Jason mentioned. And the early results are very encouraging. It's definitely something that a lot of people are interested. There's also a lot of nuances to it, where we also believe we have definitely an edge compared to many other players out there. I'm not going to announce everything today, but you will see more in the next few weeks and months. And we have a very ambitious roadmap to what we want to do with this, where we want to take it. We have like a multi-year plan almost, because it's there's a lot you can do, but it's also not trivial. It's very which is exciting, right? From an engineering perspective and product perspective, there's a lot of problems to solve, but we also believe, together also with some of our partners that we work with in the space, that we have an edge compared to others, and that we can also pull it off. But yeah, that's definitely an exciting and a very, very active topic and conversation we have at the moment in the company.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there, Vahe. I think one of the things Sven mentioned was exactly, we didn't want to just rush into incorporating AI into our go-to-market just for the sake of doing it. In fact, we really thought long and hard a number of leadership calls where we like, do we do this? Do we not do this? But I think when we last spoke, or when I had the pleasure of last being on one of your webcasts, we used that opportunity to kind of announce what we were doing in the marketplace, right? And since then, between making that announcement and saying, oh, we told people we better do something now, what we did is we took a very slow approach, right? Where, like Sven said, we vetted it with our strategic partners, showing them, getting their direction, right? We had a number of existing client meetings where how could you guys use this if we did incorporate it? And now we're at a point now where we're actively engaged in a pilot with a customer. So I think, as Sven said, this is a part of our future roadmap, near future roadmap, and something that our customers are driving. Our customers and prospects are driving. So we feel very confident that once it is generally available, it will meet a lot of the kind of needs of companies today, because we're not just thinking of a solution in a vacuum on our own.
Absolutely. And I think the way you guys have approached it is absolutely 100% the right way. That's the way usually I see AI myself. People, generally speaking, talk about AI as if it's something new, but yeah, we technically have AI for a really long time through machine learning. A majority of the stuff that we are doing today, what's called AI, is technically machine learning. It's just that it's applied differently, right? So I think that approach that you guys have is pretty cool. Shifting gears to something fun. So basically, we use gaming technology, right? So I want some of our audience to understand. Okay, so how can the gaming technology be utilized to create like enterprise application? And there's an actual formal term for it, right? So we usually call the type of applications we develop that is related to XR, AR, or VR, kind of like serious games. So there are kind of games, but they're not like the objectives obviously are different, right? So basically we are developing games, but the actual objectives of that particular scenario, right? The scenario could be like a particular level that you have to complete, whether it's through training, right? So if it's a training, you're like basically you need to go from step 1 to step Z to be able to accomplish some particular task. So what's your perspective on that? Like if somebody is going to start off today, like a young developer, right? Or a young entrepreneur, right? Or an artist, like depending on where they're coming from, right? What are some of the advice you would give them as far as what to concentrate on, how to get started, how to get into the space, and what are some of the feedback you would have for them?
Yeah, I mean, no, you're absolutely. I mean, first maybe to address the first part of your question, like the gaming aspect. I mean, that's definitely, yeah, that's where. I mean, we still to this day, a large part of our application, at least that runs on the headset, is based on Unity game engine, and which comes also with some challenges, right? Because game engines were not designed with enterprise in mind, which you
Sure.
have then to add a lot of things to it to make it enterprise ready. But that's another story. But it's definitely interesting, right? I think a lot of people in our space, especially the engineering side, have a gaming, either work in gaming or are gamers, which honestly helps a lot to understand the third dimension, right? Because I've
Yeah.
seen that a lot of traditional software developers, they don't understand the third dimension. Everything's 2D, right? You have an app, you have a web app or something like that. It's all two-dimensional, right? And adding a third dimension, as trivial as it sounds, is
Yeah.
not trivial, right? To think about, then to develop, you suddenly have all this extra space around
Space.
you that you
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
something with it. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
tied to just a 2D little screen, and
Absolutely.
that requires a different thinking. And that's already everyone who has a background in gaming, be it working on games or actually just playing them, has honestly already has an unfair advantage to start with, because that helps a lot, right? Just having in mind, just
They
to
understand.
know, because a lot of things we've also then applied is like, hey, what are things we've seen in gaming that you can now translate into this space? Like things like,
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
wayfinding. We've all seen like
Yeah.
mini maps in games, or they guide you through, I don't know, you're on a quest
Yeah.
and that they show you through the level. But this can also, for example, be applied to the enterprise, right? Show a user or someone who uses the solution
Yeah. How to navigate. Yeah.
in that sense, for example. Or there's a lot of concepts you can take from gaming. And the other thing that's also interesting with gaming, and that even before there was a big thing before I went into XR, everyone was talking about gamification, meaning like a
Yeah.
traditional software in enterprise, right? Because like everyone knows who's ever used an ERP, or like especially I think SAP is always a notorious example here. No
Yeah.
one enjoys using SAP. I've never heard of someone saying I enjoy using SAP. It's a
Yeah.
necessity, right? I'm not want to bash SAP by any means. It's a very powerful tool, right? It's not easy to make an ERP solution fun, but that's a very notorious example. I think everyone I always talk to. And a lot of people have understood that to make a software more engaging, and it's not just a nice to have, it's like something that actually, if people want to use your software, even if it's for something quote unquote boring as like accounting or ERP or something like that, it helps if it's a little fun, right? And I think you see that a
Absolutely.
lot in, like, we use Salesforce, for example, for our CRM, right? They have now, like, I don't know, the instead of a loading indicator, it's Albert Einstein on a bicycle or something like that. So you have all these little elements that I think are throughout, even in traditional 2D software, that people try to do. And exactly as you said, in XR, it's obviously even more, because you are in a real world game, right? You walk around, basically the world is your level, and you can do a lot within that you would traditionally do in games, right? The same concepts, because the traditional 2D concepts, that don't work, right? I see so many, also our competitors, they use heavily rely on 2D panels, on flat stuff, which, okay,
Yeah.
just because that works on a 2D desktop doesn't necessarily translate well to a three-dimensional space, right? You really need to rethink UI, UX, what can you do? How do you leverage the space? And
Exactly.
so that's like
Exactly.
for everyone who wants to get into space, a good way is really to study these concepts, because they obviously you need to be depending. You cannot push it too far, right? If you because it's still an enterprise solution at the end of the day, right? It needs to be productive. If it's too gimmicky, that also doesn't help. But
Mm,
you need to find a healthy balance. But like having this experience and understanding also what people enjoy and don't enjoy, because let's face it, like the modern games are a piece of art. It's amazing
yeah.
what today, and
It
Yeah.
is.
not just a triple A, even like the indie games, it's like mind blowing what, and also how innovative they
Absolutely.
are, the concepts they come up with, and that's only something I would encourage everyone to study. And then to actually then I'll wrap up and so, hand it over to Jason. But to actually get into the space, it's definitely not easy because there's, it's, I wouldn't say it's saturated, but there's now a lot of players in the space. But I still believe if you have something really unique, and especially I think there's a lot of room is still for on exactly this side, right? The UX, the UI, with new concept, new ideas, how to
Yeah.
interact with software. There is a large untapped space still, that even us, right? There's so much we still need to figure out, because it's so new. Because there's no established concepts, or very few established concepts, right? You cannot just Google
Absolutely.
it. Like, I mean, every app's look the same these days, right? Roughly, because
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? You have these established concepts that they work. In XR, we still don't really have that. So everyone who's like really strong in like these kind of things, I think they have a much easier time breaking in, because there's so many unsolved problems, especially around that, like UX, usability, how to present content, and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah, you touched on a really key point, but I'll let Jason go ahead and provide his
I
input, and then I'll follow up on that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say from my perspective, I want to stay in my lane. So I've got no value to add in terms of actually game development or engineering, right? But one of the things that Sven mentioned that really triggered a thought for me is if you have listeners that are kind of looking to become entrepreneurs or looking to create that next XR solution, this concept of gamification on the design side is huge, right? And I would say if you could tie that to some sort of compliance-based process on the business side. So something a company has to do. What you'll find is you'll find probably workers, and maybe I'll call them disgruntled. I mean, that might be a strong word, but they're not going to be happy about having to follow this compliance-based process daily, monthly, whatever it is for them. So being able to gamify that and provide a solution leveraging XR or leveraging new technology, AI, whatever it is, that could be the next better mousetrap, and something that I would encourage your audience to put their massive intellect against.
Absolutely. By the way, Jason, you're saying that you're not adding value. In my opinion, I think that the work that you're doing is actually more challenging than what the engineers are doing. Selling software is not easy, right? So going through that whole process of establishing the relationships and doing all of that stuff, and being able to actually sell, that's a unique skill. Not everyone can do that, so that's extremely valuable.
Thanks,
So
Vahe. I'm going to screenshot that and use it when I have my contract negotiation with Sven. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
And all our engineers now are probably going to Slack us. It's like, what are you talking about? We have the hardest job in the
yes.
world.
Hey, I have an engineering background too, so I'm sorry to raise this, but I see a lot of value in what you do, Jason. So that's very important, very cool. But as far as UI UX, I think that is extremely important, and a lot of people are having a lot of issues when it comes to like designing what's the right, not just the experience itself, right? Not just the experience, but the actual interactions. What type of interactions we can incorporate in there? Because now we have, like as far as HCI is concerned, like human computer interaction is concerned, we have all of this now 6 degrees of freedom, right? Compared to, as you indicated, just on the 2D canvas that we have. So it takes a lot of time for the designers, especially, right? For the designers to be able to come up with unique ideas and concepts of how to utilize this whole space to make it user friendly for the end user. Because the other problem that I see, and I'm sure you guys can explain this, and actually this would become a question, is like not everyone has the ability or didn't the training of users to actually adapt the technology and use the technology, right? Like most people are having issues with the regular computer or cell phones and etc., right? Especially in enterprise type of situations, right? Now you're introducing a totally different medium, right? Whether it's the headset or augmented reality, virtual reality, or mixed reality. And I think the onboarding process of that can be simplified or gamified to make it a little easier. I'm not sure what your feedback from the clients that you have, uh, how you guys like improve that, because I know that's a huge challenge, right? How to train the actual end user to eventually they're going to be the ones that are using, right? So
Yeah,
how do you guys that?
you're spot on. Like this is I would say one of the biggest challenges is adoption, right? In on many fronts, right? It has to do with it goes all the way from the C-suite in like convincing them that an XR solution actually provides ROI, provides value, but then exactly all the way down to the end user, right? And the people actually use it then on a daily basis, right? And it's not enough to sure, maybe the first step it's enough to convince the executive to buy, but then when contract renewal comes up and everyone hates it, you're not gonna get that new extension or
Yeah,
the even expansion of the contract. So yes, that's super critical. And but I also think it's a massive opportunity because you mentioned it, right? A lot of people struggle with computers, right? And it's not even like I would say, well, a lot of people are like, oh, it's the old people. That's not true. I literally know a 90-year-old who's like
yeah,
probably more proficient than a lot of 20-year-olds in computers. So that's nothing to do with age. It's more like, do you like technology? But what I believe is it's not a very natural way to interact with technology. When you think about like how we interact with the real world, right? If I have this bottle here, I just grab it with my hand, right? Every baby can learn that, right? On a computer, everything's indirect, right? My mouse, my cursor, I need to click something. We've learned that, right? Now we're programmed to think this is just how it is, right? This is like, we have windows that we need to move around, but it's not necessarily like super organic or super intuitive. It's just like what we've learned to do over the years. And I think
sure.
XR provides a way to do that actually in a much more natural way, right? Because like this bottle, it's not, it doesn't make sense as a bottle, but like this could be a UI element, and I can just grab it, right? I can grab it in
Yeah,
XR because I can use my hands, and use it. Or like if I want to scale that, I can just do this, right? As I would with a real world object, right? So I think
Yep.
a huge opportunity is to apply how we interact with the real physical world and use that more in like spatial computing XR, because it lends itself really well. And that's something that users understand. That's not something
Yeah,
that's foreign. It is foreign in computing, maybe, or like,
sure.
a very natural thing. We're talking to each other, right? That's how we interact with human beings. Why not? I mean, I'm not talking to my computer, and I don't think I ever will. I'm not shouting into my computer. Maybe phone, yes, if you have like Siri and all these assistants and things like that, there you maybe talk, but I never talk to my computer. It's weird. Even I feel weird talking to my phone in public. But if you have a headset on, it feels extremely natural, right? It's on your head. It's almost like you give a command, it comes back, it
You're in
talks back
different
to you.
dimension. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah, and it feels normal. It feels very natural, and that's a much more natural way to interact with technology and computers in general. That's honestly what got me really excited about XR is this um, this new dimension of how to interact with technology with computers. Because like a 2D screen is just not the most intuitive. It's what we're used to, but it's not the most intuitive way. And I think if you really understand that, and very few people do, I believe, even in our space, they see it more like, oh, okay, it just, you can walk around, right? It's a portable computer. Yes, in a way, but it's also like you should treat it differently. You should treat it as a new form of computing. And that goes back to your initial question, that the onboarding is crucial, right? You need to, once people come into your solution, you need to quote unquote teach them, or they can almost have to unlearn a
how
bit
to
what they've
navigate.
learned in
Yeah,
30 years on computers, and how to use them, and like just kind of apply what you would do naturally, right? Intuitively, what you would do with an object, right? Because if you there's this very famous I'm not sure if it's actually true, but it's attributed to a quote to Steve Jobs, that he was when the iPad came out, he was somewhere on a business trip, I believe in Asia, and he saw that 3-year-old child pick up an iPad and just use it. Um, without any training, without any, and I think that's the true power of, like, the why the iPhone and iPad revolutionized the world, because they were more
yep,
intuitive to use than a computer. And I think that's the big challenge, to not overload like a new user with, like, I don't know, gimmicky new things. Just try to adapt to what naturally makes sense, right? Because again, a child, they pick up a phone, they press on it, because in the real world you press on stuff and then something happens, right? And on a phone you can do that too. It's a very natural, we humans, we're
sure.
tactile, right? For example, we know how that works, or we talk, or we use our hands, and that's, I think, something we should really lean, as an industry, even us, lean way more into it, and push that to the not to the limits, but to a way that feels really, really organically and natural.
Absolutely, absolutely. And following up on this, so next question is haptics. So
Mm.
I'm in the process of producing a couple of videos on haptics right now. Um, have you guys deployed or integrated any haptics solutions into one of your projects or into one of the clients that were requesting, maybe if they had a need for that? And
We
that's the
have.
sense of touch. So haptics, just for people who may not know the background, is the feeling of producing sensation in a virtual environment. So it could be either through gloves or suits and etc. So uh, maybe in a military situation that would make sense, right? In a military situation, but I'm not sure if you guys ever had any opportunities to play around with any haptic solutions.
We have not, to be honest. And the reason is not that not that I don't think it's interesting. I think it's more, so far there hasn't been like a clear, like, or there hasn't been. I mean, I know there's a lot of technologies out there, and by the way, Vahe, if you I'll definitely tune in to these episodes, because that's actually something I need to educate myself even a bit more. Um, I wouldn't say it was the first thing we looked at, because again, we just mentioned it, right? There's so many new things anyways. And what we've seen
Yeah,
mostly as an issue is a bit like it's an additional thing you need to have, right?
hardware. Yeah,
First,
yeah,
exactly, it's more hardware, right? You already need the glasses, right? It's an investment, and it's something new. You need to put it on your head. And then if you also need to use like a glove or something like that on top of that, you know, maybe you overwhelm people, right? And then you also, okay, how do you pair it, right? How do you make sure it actually works? There's all these things that come on top of it, and then you need to see, okay, exactly, there's complexities, and then you also need to think about, especially in the enterprise, right? People work with their hands, right? In a lot of cases, they are, and sometimes they even have gloves or like something like I don't know, like whatever they use for work, and you cannot then just have something else also in your hand. So there's a lot of challenges around that, practical challenges, right? Not even technology wise. And it obviously needs to work, right? It needs to actually provide value. I think the early ones I've seen a few years ago, they're cool, but I mean, okay, then you have something, you touch something, it vibrates. I mean, that's in the enterprise, that doesn't provide that much value, right? You need, I think for gaming, it's a whole different story, right? There, it's really cool, right? If you could, like, I don't know, you have like, you touch an electric something and it vibrates a bit or feels like it gives you a little bit of a shock or something. That's cool, right?
Yeah.
But in the enterprise, it needs to provide actual value, right? I think what I could definitely see is if you had the like material, right? Because currently, if you have a three-dimensional object, and I mean, obviously you feel nothing when you put your hand in it, and whether it's wood, metal, or fabric, it's all the same, right? And obviously, if you can simulate that, right? If you can, like, okay, you touch it, it feels like fabric, or it feels like metal. That's interesting, right? That opens up a lot of use cases, especially like in design and in these kind of fields. But I'm not sure if we're there. I mean, maybe that's actually something maybe a question back to you, what the latest state there is. Because if it's just like, okay, it's either touch or no touch, you just feel something. I mean, that's okay, right? But I don't think this would be enough for a lot of enterprise customers to make the investment, to deal with the additional headache, right? How do you pair these things? How do you share them, right? That's also something that a lot of people don't think about, right? In the enterprise, like, okay, you have shift workers, right? You have, okay, then you gave it on to the next one. Do these things actually work with all types of hands? Do you need, what's the setup required? All these things, right, that you deal with headsets. And we were just like, there's so many problems to solve. We're staying away from that one just yet because we don't believe it. There's quite enough value to justify the extra headache on the technology side, but especially on the customer side then as well. But I think that's also going to change. It's definitely something that's I think one day we will. It's probably expected even. But in my opinion, this is just like I'm big caveat. I'm not necessarily fully up to date with the latest in haptics hardware. I don't think we're quite there yet for the enterprise. That's kind of my take on it. But I would love to be proven wrong, right? There's nothing. It's like if we're further already, super happy to hear and learn about that.
Absolutely.
Vahe, if I could just jump in real quick there, because I mean, again, it goes back to kind of the last question you asked and something Sven said that triggered me. For us, like, we're living in this world now where things are like becoming smaller, and we live in a high def world where like visual picture quality is getting better with TVs and gaming experiences, right? I mean, like, think about, dating myself again, like the original Super Mario Brothers versus anything that Nintendo is putting out now, right? Like the visuals are much more high def, they're much more crisper. The technology that people are using is getting smaller, right? And it's all about enhancing the end user experience, right? And so for us, if we can find ways to incorporate like side technologies like haptics that enhance the user experience, then I think then we're all for adopting that, right? But ultimately, or partnering with that. But ultimately, it's like if it's just one more thing that an end user has to work with that is providing quasi value and or adding just another component to the things that they have to do to try to do their job, that becomes then a question of, do we really need it, right?
100%. Know exactly where you guys are coming from, and also the explanations, because I'm in the kind of in the same boat. However, the actual hardware is there. The hardware is getting better, but there's a lot of complexities, and it's not going to be 90% of the use cases. Actually, 90% of the enterprise applications are not going to have a need for any type of haptics, but there are some specific, very very specific use cases that it might benefit them, right? These are specifically for like, let's say, high risk situations in manufacturing facilities where, let's say, in a VR training, they have to actually feel the objects if they're getting trained on the feeling the objects, like whether it's, even temperature. Well, some of the gloves actually do have sense the temperature. You can actually sense. You can have like there's this Italian company, actually really nice. I met them I think last year also, that they have these gloves that enables you to simulate not just the feeling of touching and vibrations and things like that, but also heat as well. So it's improving, but you're absolutely right. It's still too many layers of complexity, actually, and yet another set of hardware that needs to be put on for the end user, and then the calibration and all that stuff that goes along with it. But just curious to see if maybe any one of your clients ever deployed something like that or not, where that's basically where the question was happening. But that's the primary question on that. Very cool. And regarding Nintendo, Nintendo Switch is a very nice form factor. I actually love the design. It's beautiful. I got it for my son last year for Christmas. No, or was it for his birthday? Actually, for his birthday. And then I really like the way the hardware is designed. So you can port it. You can have it portable. It has two controllers. Multiple people can play with the same actual device. You can dock it to a station, hook it up to like a big screen TV, and etc. And of course, all of the great games that come from Nintendo. I keep calling it Nintendo NES. when we just got it, my son's like, "That's not NES. That was in the '90s." I'm like, "Okay, that's the one I know."
Exactly.
Oh, but like
that's the
you actually raise a good point, or a good analogy we can take for the XR space with what Nintendo did. We had this console wars, right? We had Sony with the PlayStation, Microsoft with the Xbox, and Nintendo with I grew up with the N64, Nintendo 64, then we had the GameCube, and I think what Nintendo did exceptionally well and realized very quickly is they don't want to necessarily compete with Sony and Microsoft on pure like hardware, like almost like this brute force. Like, Sony and Xbox, they were always like, okay, better hardware, better graphics card, better this. And that was the arms race. And Nintendo was like, you know what? We're staying out of this. We focus on innovative concepts, right? Like the Wii was like, some people didn't like it, but it was a smash hit. I think it was like one of the most sold consoles in history with like the motion, the motion controllers. And now the Switch, as you said, has a different form factor, right? It's portable, but you can also hook it up to a TV. And they're successful. They're very, very successful. And I think that's also, and I think that's a good blueprint for, we talked about like, people want to get into the space, maybe new entrepreneurs. Think outside of the box, right? Don't always think like, oh, okay, this is what these companies do. We need to compete in the same way. Because if you really want to compete like eye to eye on the exact same thing with a large company, even with an somewhat established company like us, it's very hard, right? If I would be a new founder, have a team of 3, to replicate what we have is years. It's like it's not easy. But if you think about like a completely new concept, maybe like again like Nintendo, I'm not talking about the different hardware form factor, but just conceptually, right, as something that other people didn't think of, right? And people like it, right? But the notion was like, oh, you need better graphics. That's all people care about, just better graphics, better graphics. And Nintendo was like, when you look at the Switch games early on and now, they're graphically not amazing necessarily, but even there they have a very cool concept, right? With like, I'm a huge Zelda fan, and like the graphic style, right? It looks beautiful, even though it's not necessarily the most high res textures and things like that. It's not hyper realistic, but the style lends itself well. It's it's what we're familiar with Nintendo. And I think Nintendo is a great example of turn all of that into like massive strengths and then also translate to actual commercial success. And I applaud them. I love Nintendo. I'm a huge fan, but I think it's really a masterclass in like how just applying new concepts from a design perspective can really get an edge compared to just raw, maybe what Xbox and PlayStation do, raw power, raw processing, which also has its place, right? But it's a very good example, Nintendo.
Yeah, it's the when I opened the box and I saw it, and then I actually put it together, I'm like, this is genius. It truly
Yeah.
was genius. I mean, they did something that is the form factor is very user friendly, especially for the not just adults, but primarily for kids, right? Kids who are actually playing it, right? So that's cool. Very cool. All right. I think we are almost to the hour, so I don't want to take too much of your time. There's too many things that we can discuss, and it's always a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. I know you guys are super busy. Uh, any last words before we depart? Maybe what to expect in the next 6 months from Sphere?
You want me to go
Yeah.
first there, Sven?
Yeah.
Or-
You go first. You go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, Vahe, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I know both in a formal setting like this and in an informal setting, we really appreciate what you're doing for the XR industry on both the enterprise and consumer side. Just getting more information out there and the effort you put into highlighting companies like ours, we're so appreciative. So thank you very much. From a sales side, I think this is a really exciting year for Sphere. 2025, we're off to a really great start with some very strategic partnerships. I think we've seen some announcements on LinkedIn regarding what we're doing with Niantic, and Sven was just with that team this week, and he can probably give you some more details there. But what we're really excited about are the net new customers that we're bringing on board. We'll have potentially, a record-breaking Q1 on both the revenue side and the net new client side. And once we get those signed up, we're happy to share those customer names with the marketplace and explain what they're doing. But really, really exciting times for not only Sphere, but I think more so for the XR industry. So thank you for the platform to speak.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I can definitely. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having us. Any time, I always enjoy the conversations with you. And yeah, exactly what Jason said. Both for Sphere, but I think also for the larger market, it really feels like. I mean, we've been saying that for like 5 years now, but I really feel like 2025 could be the year. Because as Jason said, the traction we see, the momentum is definitely way more. Yeah, exactly. I saw it in the back. But I really things have changed. Let's put it like that. Things definitely have changed. I've been in that space for many years now, and people get it now, right? Companies get it. They
Yeah.
see the
Yeah.
value. They understand it. It's not just like something. Because let's face it, 5 years ago, people played with it, like in innovation departments. Now it's actually being deployed, right? The customers we have, they deploy that in the hundreds across the world for actual productive use, and that's really cool to see. And I think that's what excites me enormously about this year. Is of course all the things we've talked about, right? Our AI initiatives, the partnerships we're working on and with, and there's a lot going to come out this year. But yeah, I think it's really the market. I really think now is finally where we always hoped it would be, and now it's hopefully only going up from here. But it's an exciting time at the moment. There's also with new hardware coming, and for those people, maybe that's the last thing. For those people who are still worried about the hardware landscape, don't be. There's we can't talk about it publicly, but we work with a lot of these players. There's a lot coming. There's a lot coming on the hardware side. Really cool stuff across the board, all the way from pass-through MR to true AR to smart glasses and everything in between. But I wouldn't be worried about the hardware market moving forward. There's a lot is
Absolutely.
coming. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited. Let's put it like that.
Awesome. Thank you. I 100% agree. I think this is the year that XR will take off even more so. And we do have a lot of really nice hardware coming. So I'm sure Android XR is one of them that you guys are excited about. And also Meta is coming up with the Orion 2 or Orion glasses as well. Very cool. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much again for your time. And hopefully we can have another discussion end of year or early next year.
That's good.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.